After settling on an overall theme for my Astra Militarum Drop Troop army, I decided on a desert camo color scheme. Rather than paint a single test model, I decided to just go ahead and jump right in and make a big spongy mess. And this video shows you that process. Howdy y'all, Patrick at Bombshell Miniatures here. I had already painted my first squad of Tempestus Aquilons in a sort of urban camo style before deciding on an overall color scheme for my entire army. Since these aren't historical models, I kind of have a lot of latitude as far as color schemes regarding their uniforms. But with that in mind, I went ahead and researched cinematic references like Black Hawk Down and the HBO series Generation Kill, which takes place during the Desert Storm period. These feature desert uniforms with variations in color schemes and patterns and textures if you look closely enough. So, without looking at any of this ahead of time, I just went ahead and barreled right ahead and started sponging stuff on. I started off by priming the figures black-brown and then oversprayed them with ivory. And this gives me kind of a zenithal type of a primer process, but instead of going from black to white, I've kind of narrowed the spectrum a little bit so that if I do want to use black or white, I can use that for special effects. Then I wanted to move on and start putting the camo pattern down first. So I took this packing sponge, the foam material, and started tearing that into little bite-sized pieces. So I could kind of shape it and, get it in, sort of the nooks and crannies or, in between stuff, where I wanted that camo pattern to go. These are a special set of tweezers that that sort of clamp things, into the end of it, so that way I can hold the sponge and not make a mess or whatever. And here's where I kind of went wrong to start off with, is that I went ahead and sponged black-brown back over the ivory, which was really too dark and wound up being too many colors as far as the camo pattern goes, that I really wanted. So I just went ahead and sponged that over all of the figures in the squad. And then I realized, oh, what I really want to use is Dark Umber to sort of go over that, first. So I went ahead and sponged the Dark Umber on there, and it kind of fit in with what I was wanting, even though there were more darker patches in the armor than I really wanted there to be. So I tried to cover over those mostly with the Dark Umber. Then I took the ivory color, and you can see that it's much lighter, concentrated on the sponge than it was whenever I just sprayed it over the top, lightly for the primer effect for the undercoat. And so this kind of gave it a beige color as an undercoat. But then as I was sponging lightly over the top of that, it created that I guess gravel kind of effect that you'll see in a lot of these desert camouflage patterns, where there's little flecks of like ivory color and so forth in there. So in order to make their boots and the webbing and so forth on their equipment stand out, I decided I kind of wanted to go with the golden brown color as sort of a warm, more sort of an orangey kind of a color. I thought that was, suitable for the desert color camo scheme. However, after I did a little bit of research later, there's a lot of their equipment and a lot of webbing that I see, in the videos that I looked at, where it's olive drab, or it's a dark green, or like even black in some cases, because some of the equipment, comes from other areas where they have surplus, or stuff gets misdirected, or they're like, if they're deployed to a particular area, they won't be equipped with the right kind of gear for the area that they're in, and it may come later, and so there's mismatched type of stuff. And they even talk about that a little bit in the Generation Kill series, where they they didn't have the right kind of fatigues in the area that they were deployed to. So here I'm just going to go forward and continue to block out the base colors for some of the other areas in order to create separation between the uniforms and their other equipment and other details. I just took this ivory color and base coated the spats over their boots in order to create more interest and separate those areas, you know, on the lower part of the figure. It was a little tight, you know, getting in between some of those places, but the coverage on the Monument Hobbies paint is really great, and even when you thin it down to like a really milky consistency, I kind of hate to use that word because that's very ambiguous in a lot of instances. It's like, well, you know, what kind of milk is it, you know, right? But I mean, it flows really well off of the brush, and you can really thin it out, and it still will give you a nice solid coverage without having to go back and do another coat in most cases, which is one of the reasons why I'm using the Pro Acryl paints to do a lot of the heavy lifting on most of the army anyway. So at this point, I went back to the golden brown. It was the same color that I used on the boots, and just went back and took care of all of the webbing. So like their straps and their pouches and any other kind of equipment that was on the model, I just painted it all the same color because when you look at like a lot of the military uniforms, particularly in movie productions and that sort of thing, there's kind of they're trying to camouflage themselves. They're trying to you know, keep a uniform look at a distance to where it blends in with the surroundings. So if there's a lot of different kinds of colors of stuff, then it doesn't look like it's from the same area. At this point, I went ahead and moved on and started blocking out the color for the weapons. There's a process for coating the metal on most firearms, which is called bluing, and it's you can look that up if you want. I mean, I don't really know all of the details of that particular process, but I do know that it gives it a particular kind of a look. And so in order to sort of achieve that in a miniature form, I like to base coat my weapons that are going to be, quote, black in this Payne's gray color, because it gives it this sort of cool and blue undercoat that really represents that bluing process that they use on coating the weapons. Now I know that in more recent times, like desert camo equipment will be camouflaged to go along with, you know, the overall look. But in this instance, and in the reference movies that I was watching, you know, all of their weapons were black, like that. So here's another place where I kind of went wrong on some of that, is that I went ahead and dry brushed the webbing with this golden brown color, which is kind of a light orange sort of a shade. And I didn't really like the way that it came out on the weapons, so I wound up having to go back and sort of undercoat those with the Payne's gray. Then I also highlighted those again, and I'll show that here in just a moment, with re-highlighting the weapons with the Payne's gray and the white color. But here I wanted to go ahead and create sort of a uniform wash over the whole figure in order to give it this brown color to create depth and contrast in the shadows. And this also kind of makes the details like the highlighting on the webbing pop out a little bit more, because the orange color of that, you can see that it sort of pops through that brown wash as it seeps into the crevices. But it also tints the surface area just a little bit, so there's like a little bit of staining that kind of brings that ivory color back down into sort of a warmer brown tone, which is also what I wanted. And that sort of gives it this mid value across the whole model, and like, you know, that's baked right into the name, uniform wash. It gives it more of an overall look. Plus, these guys are, you know, they're out in the dirt and they're out in the elements, and it's dirty and gritty and so forth. And I wanted to give it that sort of earthy feel, and that unifying wash really helps that. Here, like I said, I've gone back over the Payne's Gray areas with a dry brush in order to highlight or, you know, edge those areas that I had undercoated with Payne's Gray. So there's not really a recipe for, you know, this sort of blue-white color. It's basically just, I sort of mix it, eyeball it to where it's light enough that it will show up on the edges and show up on the corners and so forth, to sort of outline the weapon without having to fuss with it a lot and, you know, edge highlight everything, you know, really carefully. Because those extra little scratches and so forth, they lend a lot of character to the weapons and show that they've been in the environment and they've gotten dinged up and scratched and used, and so it adds that kind of character to it. So there again, with the unifying wash idea, I went over those Payne's Gray areas, you know, straight with the black wash in order to, you know, bring the value of that down to settle in the recesses. And it does exactly the same thing in more of a cool way than the warm tones of the brown wash on the rest of the figure. So it kind of creates a contrast for the weapons to stand out as cool against the warms of the uniform color. So that way they're a little bit more easier to identify on the tabletop, because I'm going to be looking at these, you know, as I'm playing them, from, you know, 12 to, you know, 18 inches away or more, depending on how big the deployment area is. So I want to be able to see, okay, well, who's got, you know, a las pistol and who's got a las rifle and that sort of thing. So these are the colors that I chose in various different shades for all of the different skin colors. So I mixed up about, I want to say 3 different skin colors in this. There's a Caucasian skin color, and then there's sort of a mid dark tan sort of a skin color, and then there's a darker skin color, sort of a rich brown. And so I just basically base coated some of the various characters in these different shades of flesh color, and then I went back and gave those areas a unifying wash. So on the Caucasian skin, for those characters, I went ahead and used a glaze of flesh wash, which is more of a sienna color that really goes over the Caucasian tinted skin a little bit more than say the brown wash would. This gives it a little bit more of a rosy complexion, makes it look like they've been, you know, out in the sunshine in the dry area of the desert. And so I thought, well, this was really suitable for, you know, that kind of a skin color. But basically I didn't spend a lot of time on this because I wanted to get these guys on the table, and particularly to move on to the next unit. So here I've just gone and taken a little bit lighter shade of that original base color for the skin and just highlighted certain areas. It's not really detailed. I just wanted to go in and add just a little bit of the separation, punch up the contrast just a little bit more than what I was left with just putting the wash over it. So this is a really quick way of getting a really wider spread to your contrast than just doing one technique or the other. You could get away with also not doing a wash. You can just start with like a darker base color and then just, you know, highlight up from there, and that's another way to do that. This is faster for me, so I prefer to use the wash on those areas. Then I went on and started putting the metals and stuff on there. So I wanted a copper kind of a look for the flamer. That I don't know why that says flamer to me. I guess there's back in the day there were the old blowtorch, you know, the little copper blowtorch cans and that sort of thing. So this copper look just always makes me think of like, well, it's some kind of a torch or flamethrower or something like that. So it felt, you know, like it should be that. The metallics in the Pro Acryl range are really smooth and they really cover very well. It seems like that the paint flake or the metallic flake in those is really fine, and so they come out really shiny and give a really nice metallic look. Also, because there's a really good spread of the metallic colors that they have, you can sort of do a non-metallic metal technique with, you know, painting darker areas and then highlighting with lighter metallics and that sort of thing. Because I'm not really doing that technique on these particular models, there again, this is just a quick painting process. I just went ahead with, you know, the straight color and then went straight to a wash over that in order to bring down the colors in the creases and so forth. So here I'm taking a little bit of the black wash and just brushing that towards the end of the flamer nozzle, and that's going to give that sort of a scorched look. There's a lot of different techniques for doing this plasma effect that I've seen online. There again, I didn't want to bust out the airbrush and do a lot of, you know, fiddling around with, yeah, doing it like a glow effect or anything. I'm thinking that if they're going to be outside in a desert sort of a situation, then there's probably not going to be a lot of, you know, light bleed over onto the other areas of their uniform or their surrounding area. You're just going to get this really hot, intense light coming from, you know, the coils, you know, in the plasma gun. So all I did was, you know, just a straight wash over that, is just to tint it down. I went back and hit the white areas a little bit more to bring them out, and that was basically it. It's a very quick process. So once I did that through the squad and then painted, you know, those special areas on some of the particular characters, it was just a matter of going in, you know, putting a base color in and then painting the rim on that. Most of the rims for this, particularly because it's desert camo scheme or whatever desert type of setting, I just went with dark umber base rim on that. Here, I've also kind of goofed up with the colors that I've chosen to base coat the groundwork. So it doesn't really look, you know, deserty enough to me. So what I'll do is once I get a lot of the units where I want them, you know, at the stage that I want them, I'll go ahead and go back and sort of repaint each one of those units so that all of the base tops will match more similarly across all of the different units. So that's where they are at this point. Let's go ahead and take a look at the whole squad. Thanks for sticking around and checking out the technique for this sponging process for the camouflage pattern. If you enjoyed seeing that, then if you would click the like button down in the little thing below there, that'll really help the channel out and get us seen by more folks that may be interested in the same thing. Also, please tell me your ideas for your own desert camo patterns or techniques that you may have already tried for something like this. I'd be really interested to hear what those are. I've also created a playlist for this series of videos that I'm doing for my Astra Militarum army in order to make it a little bit easier for folks to follow along with the different units that I'm going to be painting in this particular color scheme. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and click the little bell so that you'll be notified whenever I post new installments of this series. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time on the Workbench.